I'll kick us off. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first 2023 meeting of Akri's community meeting. Akri abides by the CNCF Code of Conduct, which we've attached in the meeting notes here if you want to read more about it. But it kind of boils down to, be a respectful person. And there's pathways for also reporting any disrespect. These meetings are recorded, so if you would like to not be recorded, feel free to turn off your video or fully leave if you don't want your name present. On the agenda today, we don't have anything besides like a warm Happy New Year, and we can just have an open discussion and do issue triage if we have time. We can also discuss any agenda items we'd want to have for next meeting as well. And with that being said, if anybody has any also, if you're attending the meeting, feel free to drop your name into the meeting notes. I can, or someone else can open up the notes for the duration of this meeting. That'd be great so that anyone can do that. So that's kind of the first ask of the meeting. So with that being said, does anyone have any other announcements that they would like to share?
I do. I have a full-time engineer position to work on Akri that we are working to open up, and I've been told that I can announce that publicly now. So yay. So if anybody
Awesome.
knows anybody who wants to work on Akri full-time and get paid for it, I think we're looking for, I'm hoping that I can get it as a senior position, but also if somebody knows a more junior position, we can definitely coach pretty well. We have some amazing engineers who double as amazing coaches. So
That's super exciting. And I think I wrote it down here in the HackMD notes, but feel free to shout that out in the Slack if you're looking for folks there too who've had some time interacting with Akri. And also, while you're onboarding that person, feel free to point them to the Slack or any of us if they need help as well. Yeah, on those lines, I guess we could kind of talk about this is the new year. We could talk about kind of what are Akri's goals for the year if we want to make resolutions in that sense. Like, are there any key features that we see that will make Akri even better this year and kind of flesh it out into even more production scenarios?
I think that all the customer asks that I've gotten are already represented in open tickets. I think that's a pretty safe statement.
Awesome. And so I think we last community meeting, or maybe it was the community meeting before, went through those or went through some tickets and kind of prioritized them. So I'm wondering if we need a priority label on tickets. We don't have a clear, I don't know, if we have a priority label on something, sometimes that makes it seem like that's in work and happening. So I don't know if that would be factual, but it would maybe be helpful to have some way of kind of saying this is a priority ticket.
Yeah, and also when we do hire, it might be good to go ahead and know upfront, like, how do we make sure that we respect the community nature of the project, even if there are customer requests that we are working on, right? Like, how do we make sure that like some customer request that SUSE wants doesn't stomp on what the rest of the community wants, right? Because that's not fair either, right? So it might be worth kind of having some of that conversation of, yeah, how, like, just in general, like, what are the guidelines? How do we make sure that we play nicely as a community project?
I can add my first thoughts on that, but other folks, please jump in. I think one of the things that's helpful for that is proposals, because that's showing a clear laying out an idea, putting that in PR and approving that before anything goes into code. So just like Kubernetes is KEPs, that kind of helps. So we can, for any big feature, I think that's one way to make sure that it's community approved. And you can, if you want to double down, you could put in Slack, hey, this proposal's in review. If you have any thoughts, please put them in before this time, is one way to do it.
Like that. Did we open up the discussions tab on the Akri GitHub? I don't even know what that takes, if it's just a little checkbox or something.
Um, it probably not. I mean, if is it
Okay.
on GitHub? But we've talked about that in the past. I
Okay.
think I'd be curious. I've heard people say that that's duplicating messaging when it could be done in Slack, but at the
Mm.
same time, I kind of disagree with that because I think plenty of people just aren't interested in getting on Slack. Um, yeah, so I can enable it, but it is not enabled. I would be open to that. Do people have, I don't see a reason not to enable it, I guess. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I'm also open to enabling it. I think it's just another way to get more engagement. And if anyone has any concerns, but they're not on the Slack, like you just said, it's a good way to keep that in mind. And I think based on like what it looks like, you can also like upvote and downvote. So we can keep track of, I guess, like priority that way.
Okay, I feel like if there's no opposition to that, why don't we just go ahead and open it? Does anyone feel like they want to be the one who flips that switch in particular? Okay, I will flip the switch. I will take on the honors. Okay. That reminds me, Audie, do you mind giving us an update on our website since it is down still?
Yes. I actually wanted to do that earlier, but my mic was being weird as well. But uh,
No worries.
so I think kind of like late of December, we noticed that the website went down. What was supposed to happen was we had the CNCF like take over the Akri domain, so they were owning and managing everything, and then they pointed it back to our GitBooks website. I think what happened was that the name servers from the CNCF were not like fully set up, I think. So they didn't some of the records that were like previously when we had Opry set up with us, like it wasn't there. So I filed a ticket with the CNCF to say, could we add some of the new name servers as well as that one record for Gitbooks? Um, I think since I filed it around the holiday times, I haven't heard back yet, but I've been checking every day on the ticket, and as soon as I hear back on that, we should be okay. Unfortunately, since we did transfer the domain to them, we can't go back and just make our own internal host and then just forward everything through that. But as a backup, if they're unable to set it up on their own for now, I do have a backup like internal host that we could use and then say like temporarily like post it on that, and then afterwards we can move it whenever it's convenient.
Thanks for looking into that. That sounds great. I think usually with this is with the area that you're talking to them, right? Or Yuri ticket desk, CNCF.
Yeah, it was like yeah, a Yuri ticket desk, like the CNCF service desk.
Okay. And I think usually they're fairly responsive. So if it's, and I, like you said, it's in the holidays. So if they don't get back to you by the end of the week, I would bump that ticket, like comment again on it. Because maybe the notification just didn't, it got DQ'd with all the other ones coming up.
Sure thing.
And then in the meantime, I think we just got to keep pointing people to the actual docs GitHub repo, which have the same exact content, but definitely not as pretty.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's our best way around it for now.
Or I wonder if GitBooks has, yeah, because it's more confusing to give people a new URL. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the Gitbooks one is like, it's just like it'll be like Akri.gitbooks.io, I think, or something else. But yeah, I ideally would just have them go to like Akri.sh or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Any other, we have this time pretty set up freely. Is there anything that people had general questions about or want to just discuss, brainstorm, so on?
I want to check GitHub to remind myself of who was involved in that conversation real fast before I. I'm not remembering what the ticket was called, but oh, actually the OnVIF authentication. I was wondering if it might be good to have a conversation, but is Mark on? Okay, no, he's not on this call. Never mind.
Yeah,
I
that
don't know. That
was.
would make sense to have without. It seemed like he had some ideas as well. Or he had some ideas.
So I feel like this one brings up just how bottlenecked we are on credentials solutions, and we keep discussing credential solutions and kind of taking a pause on them. I know that Eugen and Audie submitted a CFP for KubeCon Europe, kind of about how Akri aims to use credential solutions. So I don't know if y'all, the CFP submission was fairly recent, have made any progress on that sense. I know Leo's looked at credentials. I don't know if we need to take the approach of everyone tries something and we see what lands. That seems to be kind of what's happening. Or if we need to have a kind of a subgroup that meets on their own or that has their own maybe GitHub's discussion thread that can be kind of the focus people on this. But this this does bring it back to we need credentials here. And so for OnVIF in particular, it's important because we can't discover unauthenticated cameras. And it looks like Mark mentions how we could change how the discovery handler does discover so that we could still discover unauthenticated or still discover cameras that require authentication, namely by removing MAC address as an identifier. That's certainly an option. I don't know if Andrew, if you have immediate thoughts on doing that, we could have a toggle there to use MAC or not use MAC. It's another option.
Yeah, my thought with that is that at least for the use cases that I'm seeing mostly is you're going to want the configuration the same at every site, right? You don't want to have any site specific configuration that which would include like which MAC addresses you're expecting. So there needs to be some way where the configuration can be the same, but then like you sideload in, or yeah, either you call out to get whatever authentication it is, or you sideload that in separately from the Akri configuration object. And I don't know what that would look like, right? But I don't want to have a different configuration per site because that breaks the model, at least in my mind.
So you're saying if we remove MAC address for some sites and not for others, that wouldn't be very helpful.
Exactly. And you also don't want to have to say like, here's 1 million MAC addresses and they're inside of your configuration or inside of the secrets and have that be at every site. I think that would also be difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I was more thinking not that the user would provide the MAC address, but rather we just wouldn't grab or utilize a MAC address for unique identification. So right now we uniquely identify an IP camera by combining essentially MAC address and IP address. We could just be using MAC address there. I don't know why we're combining. So the idea behind that was MAC address shouldn't change, IP address could. So I think that's why we wanted to rely on MAC address as a unique identifier. But we could just be hopeful. I don't know user scenarios, how often they change the IP addresses of their cameras.
I've already been with a couple customers where everything was DHCP with very short leases. Okay. And so yeah, and there's one customer in specific where their networking team and their platform team did not talk, and so it got us into this weird situation of like we were having to resolve networking stuff without being able to touch the networking stuff. Yeah. So I could see that happening again with device management as well. And
that makes sense. Yeah.
So,
That provides more impetus to use just MAC address, which is the opposite end of things. But if we're using MAC and IP, I think we would still be hurt by that, which I'm pretty sure we are, but I haven't looked at it in a while. So, so it sounds like we need a hardware-based unique identifier. MAC address is great for that, but we still want to discover cameras that require authentication. So we're back to needing some sort of device registry that the discovery handler can reach out to and say, hey, this is the MAC address. Can I have its credential so that I can authenticate and get this? Or not MAC address. Hey, this is, yeah, I don't know what the unique identifier would pass to the device registry is in that case. That's a bit tricky. We might be able to get MAC address. The thing is I did some investigation on this, and it might have been in a different, I think we might just need to dig deeper on how to get the MAC address, because normally you don't need to authenticate to get that. So like, for example, you can use ARP on an authenticated camera and get its MAC address. It's more that the libraries that were available when I was looking at this were not making it easy to do that. So I think we might need to just dig deeper on that, because we would need to have a unique identifier to give a device registry anyways.
right. Would you ever have a situation where there were two devices being exposed through the same NIC and sharing a MAC address?
I'm sure that's happened. Like, I feel like that has to have happened. I could even imagine like two cameras that are like acting as one camera doing that.
Right.
And
in that case, for like I guess like for the customer ask, in that case, then would they both share the same credentials? Because we may not be able to tell them apart. And if they're acting as the same camera, would that mean we, authenticate with them in the same way?
No.
I don't know. I feel like we need a user scenario to understand that. And I don't know how prevalent this is either. So it could be something that we see if it comes up. But
I wonder if it would be possible to find somebody. I mean, what would it take to reach out to like somebody on VIF? Whatever their governing board is. Or foundation. Thank you.
I think we should be able to.
Because they would know better than we.
I think Microsoft's a part of the OnVIF Foundation, so they should have access to the foundation, resources. But that's also something that maybe in Slack, someone like you could ask a question in Slack of like, has anyone had run into this scenario? Or know someone who we could ask to see that, kind of utilize that community.
Yeah, definitely. I think we could reach out in Slack. Anyone that's a part of the OnVIF Foundation, we could also reach out to. I know we've done similar things with OPC-UA, so I'm assuming it'll just be a pretty similar process. But to add a little bit more about like the call for proposal that Eugene and I wrote, we sort of did anticipate that we would use MAC addresses as the way to like uniquely identify a device. So if that on its own doesn't work, I think we might have to change a few more things. But we're working on getting a demo with the like the Kubernetes secret store driver, as well as the like encrypting the secrets at rest. So using the API server, we could grab the like authentication we need, so certs or anything else, and then it would be passed down to the discovery handler as it discovers devices.
I think that makes sense. I think we need to look back. I think we need to have someone look back at this issue and see if they can get the MAC address for an unauthenticated camera. I think you can do it. And we can continue to use that because that's not usually blocked by authentication. And it's just, we need to look into how to do it. So I'm going to comment that on the issue, and maybe we can, I don't have an IP camera on me anymore, so I can't really look into that. But if anyone does, if anyone wants to look at it, give it a go. But Adi, do you think you and Eugene will have maybe something to share along those lines for our next community meeting? Would love to kind of see the flow there.
Yeah, I'll be happy to like make like a kind of like an architecture diagram maybe, and then we can go from there. And
I know you walked through it briefly, but how different is it from what Leo's proposed?
That's a really good point. I should go back to Leo's demo, I think. It's a bit similar in the way that like as we discover the devices, we see what they need, and we like I guess we don't have like a UI like Leo did, but off the top of my head from what I remember, it's pretty similar. Let me go back and just see Leo's pull request, I think.
Yeah, he has his proposal inside that. Cool. Did you have thoughts, Andrew, on the credentials walkthrough that Adi briefly mentioned there?
Yeah, I had a thought that I don't know enough, but I guess my question is, how much do we need to deal with auth, right? Like, is just the discovery that the device exists good enough, and then you can let a higher order abstraction deal or the application deal with finding its credentials and authenticating?
Yeah, that's where we were when we first made Akri. Is
Okay.
we created this like security matrix or threat matrix, and basically said that's not our issue. Essentially, we will tell you your device is there, and then we will put it on the broker or the end application to know how to get the credential for the unique identifier we pass it. I think we started running into problems like this with OnBIF, where we can't even tell if the device is there without authentication. Like we were discussing, maybe that's not the case. Maybe we, like you should always be able to get the MAC address of something on a network from my understanding. And so I think we just need to look deeper into that. But I think also it's just a fuller solution to have Akri integrate with something. It doesn't need to be Akri specific. I think the idea is that we plug something in. Like I don't want it to be tied to Akri, or I hope it's not tied to Akri, and so that we don't have one device registry type that people need to use, but have something that's easy to fit in so that your brokers don't need to worry about it. And kind of like a Dapper type of serverless idea of like it's just sitting there next to you, and you can grab it and get it would be really ideal.
I think that makes sense. Okay, cool.
But I also know that sometimes in like factories that have private networks, sometimes their devices don't require authentication because the network itself is locked down. But I think we need to know more about those user scenarios to be able to say that's like a general truth.
Yeah, I'm potentially getting a factory tour sometime early February where I'll be able to ask those type of questions. We will see.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, would love if you asked that question. That would be really helpful.
I have a laundry list of questions to ask for just like basic stuff like that, where I'm like, I do not have the industry experience to know this, and I have a guess, but that's the closest I got.
Yeah, no, that's great. Sorry, working with my very cool.
Yeah, if you're able to let us know how that goes maybe next time, that'd be really helpful. I'm super interested in that.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get approval and actually figure out like what it's one of those. I'm going over to Europe for a single day meeting, and I'm like, I don't want to go to Europe for a single day. That's silly. So it's a lot of flying for 8 hours of meetings. So I've got a couple of different customers and that I'm trying to do meetings with while I'm over there. And one would be a factory. So here's hoping. Yeah, I can definitely take notes and share those the non-specific to the customer notes. I would be able to share publicly.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
And then Kate, I know you mentioned this a little earlier. I just wanted to like bring it up. You did mention like the Dapper-esque way of sort of a serverless way of just managing secrets and then just passing it down. I think the way Eugene and I envisioned this, and I can double check, was essentially like I think Dapper uses this the CSI driver itself. So we were just using like what Dapper underlying uses, because I think Dapper has a few more services that we don't need. It's very similar in a way of we just modify our config to say we will be taking in these secrets, and then before we get to the discovery handler, it'll automatically be there. It's like a bit of trust between the two, but
So you're saying you're gonna tell through the Akri configuration what credentials are needed?
Yeah, like on the first step, we're saying that like anyone that's if you're trying to bring a device onto the network, and when you purchase the device, the assumption is that it comes with some set of keys that have been like provisioned to it. So when you make the configuration, you'll say, for this kind of device, we have this key value pair that we need, or this something that's already in like a Kubernetes secret at the time of like the configuration.
Okay, so that in that way, there's no discovery happening, which is what we've talked about with Akri in general. Is there's not discovery, it's just onboarding. So we know that you're going to discover these devices, and these are its credentials. Go discover it using these credentials and bring it into the cluster. That seems like a fair way. I was also thinking we could not add anything to the configuration, and instead it's Akri does discovery, and when it discovers the device, it then has that identifier, say the MAC address, and knows which device registry to reach out to, which is, I think, what Leo's flow was. So I discover a device with this MAC address. So I go, hey, device registry, here's the MAC address, give me the credential, and then it has that credential.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I really don't like putting in configuration, just because like if you have different vendors for those devices across your different locations, then you get into trouble.
Yeah, and I think that also, sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say that I still don't really love having the credentials being like a secret or config map or whatever, but that's at least a much cleaner interface than having it be like specified in the configuration itself.
And this is something I want to point out too, is we don't need everything in our configuration in general. Like I've mentioned in the past how our configuration really should be two things. It should be a discovery configuration and a use configuration, but instead it's one thing. And how I kind of wish it had been two. So that being said, as we add things more, I think we should be thinking about making new CRDs instead of adding to it. I like the whole, apply one YAML, but with YAML, you can still apply one YAML. You just have two different CRDs in the same YAML file. So you still have that simplicity. You still have the Helm chart to do that. But I agree, using a config map is definitely a more external way of doing it. Also having a like credential configuration is another way to do it. But I think, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and if you did it that way, you could actually have like this two-phase discovery piece where you have like two discovery handlers. One, like I'm just thinking broadly, right? If you had like an unauthenticated discovery handler that maybe also created some other CRD that went, hey, I need a request, I need my auth, and then a authenticated discovery handler that like was able to consume that auth and then actually run in quotes the pod, right? I don't know if I like that, but it's messy, but it might give you a cleaner progression. And I'm not thinking like sorry, and let me go back just a bit. I'm not thinking this is what like Akri would want to build as like the demo apps, but this is like what professional services could build for a customer, or a customer could, or a user could actually build for themselves, something custom, just a pattern.
So to make sure I understand, you have your configuration, discovers the device. We now have this Kubernetes resource. Instead of immediately deploying the broker, there's this middleman that then goes to get the credential and will deploy the broker with the credential, or will get the credential and somehow that,
yeah, and either rediscover to get more data about, or just run another. And basically, you would be spinning up CRD that would be read by an operator, right? It's just an extra step, but it does give you kind of that cleanliness. I don't know. I'm not in love with that.
No, I like that. I think the key question there for me still is, do we need credentials for discovery, or do we only need them for use? And I think another reason that we didn't give, some people like to have the credentials for discovery because it gets more information about a device. So say you want more digital twin experience with Akri, you need the discovery handler or the device describer to have credentials so that it can then put in the OnVIF configuration. I don't know much about, say frame rate is only an authenticated endpoint, to be able to say it's this frame rate. So I think then you could essentially use that instance as a digital twin. So say you're able to read that instance or create a new type of the instance that is modifiable because the Akri instance isn't by a user. You could then have your own operator that's doing something like that. So I think that's also an interesting use case for people. So, but the question is that Akri's job to get that extra information or not? That's a tricky one.
Yeah, let me reach out to a couple of the contacts that I have and see. Yeah, let me ask around.
Okay.
I can't promise any answers, but I think I have a couple of leads on people who might be able to, who would know, or at least would have a more informed opinion.
Okay. So we are once again talking a lot about discovery. Audiogen, is this discussion, has this been helpful at all for the work y'all are doing? Is there something else that can be more helpful for that work? I'm curious because I don't know how this aligns with everything you all are doing.
I think this is definitely helpful. We are trying to think of a solution that sort of like encompasses everything. I think one of the difficult problems with authentication is that every mechanism has its own way of doing things. Like OPCUA has one way, ONBIF has another way, and we're trying to sort of encompass all of that. And then we're also trying to see what does everyone need. Like you mentioned, like, do we want to do discovery before we even get to the, I mean, do we want to do authentication before we even get to the discovery handler? Is it okay if right before we use the device with like the broker itself, we just pass in the auth right there? I think the general way like both of us had thought about this was we sort of just keep it as from like the beginning, you have all your credentials ready, and then you're essentially just picking based on what you see. But I think the more we learn about use cases, like Andrew mentioned, the more we're able to see like, is the way we're thinking of this right, or do we need to like re-architect things?
Well,
yeah.
The reason I like Dapper, why I'm talking about Dapper, is because I like the idea of being able to make one decision now that can also work for another decision. So for example, say we decide we only need creds for brokers, you could just have a get cred inside that broker that essentially talks to a Dapper sidecar and gets the cred. But then say later we also want the discovery handler to have credentials. It's the same flow. It's just that sidecar's in the discovery handler too, and it calls get cred there. So and I'm not saying we use Dapper, I'm just saying that model of being able to have a get cred equivalent and be able to plug that into whether it's the agent, the discovery handler, or the broker, and let that be more of a user-driven decision would be kind of the dream. And obviously it's a dream and I have not explored that and don't know its feasibility, but this is once again, me being mad for not having tried Dapper or at least understanding what's going on there, because I think that sounds very helpful to me to have something like that that's kind of universal across Akri's architecture.
I see. Yeah, sort of like a sidecar for just the device registry in a way that we can bring up and then spin down whenever we're done using like that.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be a sidecar. I just mean more like one command, like it's an interface that it's like a get credential interface, and it's the same and it looks the same no matter whether the discovery handler is calling it, the broker's calling it, or the agent's calling it, so that you could essentially add that interface to any of those components, depending on whether you need the credential at stage 1, 2, or 3.
Gotcha. I think our initial, I want to like find my notes on this because I think we looked at Dapper for a bit, and our only concern was, or like I guess the major concern was just the like, I think it was just it had so much to offer and we were only using like such a small like subset of it. But maybe I should go back and like revisit like what like we saw with that. I think the other thing that was brought up was at one of the meetings we'd also talked about trying to use more of like the Kubernetes like native implementations for everything. So like, since secrets already exist, can we piggyback off of that and use that as is? So there's just like a lot less like weight on anything external than Akri, but yeah.
Yeah, I also forgot how I mentioned Drogue.io has its own solution for this, which I keep forgetting. But yeah, that's Red Hat's solution for replacing firmware, discovering IoT devices, etc. for Kubernetes, and they have a device solution. So looking at that, maybe utilizing it, I think they've thought through it, and they're completely Kubernetes native. So I think we should try and see what they're doing there and learn from that as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Drogue was the one that I like forgot. I think that I should like look deeper into.
Do we have it in the notes, the specific?
Yeah. And a pattern that I saw used by a different project that I thought was really clever is basically having sidecars be able to register themselves against the main app as effectively an extension point, right? So you say, so in this case, you would, a user would run an additional sidecar that in the same pod, or honestly, it doesn't matter even if it's not in the same pod, that would basically call back to the main app and go, hey, I'm a way to do authentication. Here's my name. And then the OnVIF broker could then call back and say, hey, I need an authentication for OnVIF, or my custom auth 123, right? And then that would be proxied through to that extension point, which could be a sidecar. But then that way, the project could give like the base sidecar, but then anybody could come in and say, hey, I'm actually going to redo how auth works, right? Completely. In a relatively simple way, because everything's just proxied through transparently.
I like that, and it kind of fits our extensibility model. So if I reiterate it in simple terms, is it that we always use a sidecar for auth? It has the same function interface, but you can pop in and out your sidecar versus our sidecar.
Exactly, and the operator experience would be just overriding something in the values YAML that goes, hey, don't use the basic, or maybe you do use the basic, but also add on my custom sidecar auth. Right, so it would be kind of named auth mechanisms, because if you've got a mixed environment, then you might actually need multiple different auth mechanisms depending on specific use cases. Because I'm thinking there might be cases where you have a cluster that's spanning up an entire factory floor, right? And so things will get weird very quickly.
My only concern about basically using the sidecar, well, never mind. I was going to say my concern is, because there I was conglomerating sidecar with device registry, but all the sidecar does is it gets the credential. That can be anything, because I was worried about air gap scenarios. But in that scenario, you may replace our sidecar, which calls to a remote registry, with one that can call down to a local one. So maybe that solves that problem in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be, and you could do the same thing that you did for broker, or for registration, or discovery handlers. Let's actually use the right word. And where you have the that interface already defined with the library, and you, that way somebody who's writing their own can just kind of go, I'm just going to implement this library and for this interface, and all of a sudden everything just works right for them. Because at the end of the day, it's a webhook or a gRPC or whatever request.
Yeah, a simple gRPC interface is great, and you could use a local socket one just because they'd be co-located. Okay, well, these are all great ideas. Awesome.
And hopefully we hire somebody quickly so they can be implemented quickly.
More hands the merrier for sure.
So much.
Okay, cool.
I started practicing Rust again, so I'm hoping that I can actually write some code.
Hey, that'd be great. If there's nothing else, I think we can move to issue triage. I might need to hop off during triage. And there's a meeting going on right now, and I can catch the tail end. If that sounds good, but if there's other things we want to discuss, then I can stay on. Okay, then I'm gonna say bye. Happy New Year, everyone. Adi, I think you're on issue triage. But this is an exciting discussion.
Yep. Happy New Year. We'll see you at the next one.
Yeah, bye.
Cheers.
All right, let me pull up the GitHub issues and then we can go from there. Okay, let me share my screen. Is everyone able to see my screen right now?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, I think we just have the one issue of our website being down. That's new. Everything else is just a pull request. We can go through the pull requests at the end. I think there were two new ones that I'd seen. One Harrison was working on for using the Helm templates for the SNCC template or the SNCC report, like the security report. And then the other one was like build agent updates and updating to the latest Kubernetes versions. But before we get into that, I'll go through all the issues we have right now. The docs.akri.sh I'm handling right now, I guess. I can assign that to myself. That was like what we talked about earlier, like the name service had changed, and we just need to like work through that with the CNCF. Okay. I can go through the investigating ones. The build agents to the latest container dependency versions. That one was also just it was basically like updating our tests. There were new Kubernetes like versions that had come out, and then GitHub was getting rid of its older like Ubuntu images. So it was a good first issue to like understand how the tests work. And I think someone had just made a pull request for that. So I'll move that to in progress. This one, I believe Kate had mentioned a bit in this. They were working on like an ARM platform, but it's like RISC-V, so it's a bit different. But I don't think we've heard any update on this since November. If I don't, did Kate leave the call? Okay, yeah, we could maybe check on that like next week or next month. Harrison, I think, fixed the OPC demo already. This is regarding the OPC like demos. Harrison, that like PR fixed the server, right?
Yeah. If you can try the new demo to see if the same issues still here, that'd be great. I think that issue is specific to the old demo.
Okay. Do you mind if I assign you to this and then you could take a look? I think I got assigned because I commented on it, but if you want to try running through the demo steps and then if it goes away, we could just close this then.
Okay, yeah, I can try to report to see if the issue is still here.
Okay. Awesome. I'll move that into I guess we'll keep that in investigating still.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay. Controller crashing when Akri config is bad. This is broken.
I've experienced this as well.
Okay. Huh. That's interesting. It seems to be when you just have a clearly broken one, it crashes and then. Okay. I guess we should check with Kate on this one too. I think we're trying to get more logs on this. Andrew, if you have any logs on this as well, you could share that in this item. That'd be really helpful.
I can see if I can reproduce again. The only times I've actually seen this were like during customer demos where like, yeah, getting logs was the not top of mind.
Ah, I see. Okay. Yeah.
Like due to some typo, right?
Yeah. I guess we can try to get logs for this as well. I think it's pretty. Yeah, it's just like a typo leads to this, but okay. These two, I believe, were rough security issues. I believe we should fix these with the last update. Uh, yeah, okay. I think we got rid of these. I'll go ahead and okay, it's like an up or no, sorry. This might be upstream. I'll keep both of these, but I do believe we got rid of two of them in the last update. Might not have been these ones. Okay. Okay, this one has some activity a few weeks ago. Essentially, like because our broker and apps are in the same repo as like Akri, like the core Akri code, we get a lot of like security vulnerability alerts because some of the things in the demo are out of date. But moving everything aside, we could have it in like separate directories. I assume that if we don't hear back, let's say by the end of this week, we could hand it off to, I think this is, yeah, Jean. So we'll hand this issue off. Updating UDev, I believe we had some change for this. I think this is still a work in progress. Anyone wants to work on this, this would be super helpful. But I think Kate had already started on a solution for this to enable this. It's basically when you have like USB cameras, UDev might report two separate ones instead of just one device, like one with metadata and another one with the actual frames. So essentially it's a way to like group both of those devices so you don't have two separate Akri instances on each of those devices. I should check with Kate on this. We can maybe talk about this in Slack if anyone wants to work on this, but I believe I remember seeing a pull request to something related to this. It might have just been like a like this docs item, but yeah, if anyone's interested in taking a look at this, we should like talk to Kate on
I can add it in the issue, but another use case would be like if you need to pull like video and like a sound card and a device or like multiple even unrelated devices that count them as one. I see that being very useful.
Oh, I see. Like if like you're yeah.
I'm thinking like a point of service system, right? Where you've got like a scanner and a like barcode scanner and a receipts printer and right, and all of these different things that are unrelated on the back end, but are related in the way that a single app probably wants to know about all of them.
Right. Okay. Sort of like, yeah, like if like one app needs multiple of them, just like grouping them all into one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll add that on the issue.
Okay, I can paste the issue in the chat here.
Cool. Thank you.
If we can move on, I think we have another rough security one. Let's see. Let's open these four here. This is an older issue from 2021, Akri and Cube Edge compatibility. I don't see much activity on this issue other than it just moving around between triage and investigating. But I also don't see any update just yet. I'm not even 100% sure. This seems to just be like an issue with Cube Edge and Akri working together. We can bump this one and see if there's any update on this one. MQTT support. Seems like there's a draft proposal for MQTT support in Akri. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of activity on this, but so we can keep it open, I guess. There's just like a doc for this. I think Yurka, Kate, Brian, a bunch of folks have been talking about this. So let's see like how this goes. We'll keep this alive. I think it already has the keep alive tag, so we should be good to go on that one. This one seems to be when the API server goes down, the agent crashes, slightly similar to the other issue we've seen. There seems to be a pull request that fixes this though, and it was already merged. So let's see. I think if that PR resolves this issue, we should go ahead and close it. I think this is the last investigating item. This is blank broker pod appearing for a single camera device. Seems similar to the multiple device notes per single device issue, like the camera frame servers or the frames itself are on one UDEV node and then the metadata is on another. Let's keep this open, it seems like, so they're all linked to the same issue. I think that's all the new issues. We can maybe go through the backlog / in progress ones. Update node dependency. I had opened that one. That's also just like updating tests and like making sure everything works. We had said if we don't hear anyone interested in working on that, I could go ahead, or one of us could just go ahead and work on it. But since it's a good first issue, we were going to keep it open for a little bit longer. So if anyone's interested, feel free to take a look at it. Andrew, I think you're working on this one. Did you want to talk more about it?
I mean, so I opened it, but I haven't actually been working on it. Yeah, this is basically one of the use cases that I ran into is actually allowing Akri to schedule, say, a virtual machine using KubeVirt, for example, and then passing a device in, do a PCI pass-through or something like that to pass the device into the VM. This is really useful for like porting legacy applications across, and then but still having the operator experience be as nice as it is with containers.
Okay. Is this something that we should, we want to? I guess we discuss this more maybe at the next meeting. I know we're a little over time.
Yeah, we could definitely do it for the next meeting. Actually, I might be in Europe for the next meeting.
Okay. I mean, we can maybe start some discussions on it, and then, or we could even talk about this in Slack. But yeah, we could look more into it next meeting.
Okay, cool.
Harrison, did you want to talk about this item?
Yeah, so I'm still working on this one, and I think last time we talked about having the trouble of using the hash, appending the hash to the environment variable's name, because the hash is computed inside the agent, but all this populating the environment variables are done in the discovery handler. So I'm still working on it, and I was trying to just to append the ID of the resources to the environment variable, and then when inside the broker, I was trying to just extracting all the environment variable with that resource name and then see how it goes. I think I should have more updates in the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Next one then. This seems like they're trying to add a new protocol. There was a PR that was closed. I feel like we talked about this before. I assume that there's just still work going into this. So let's see. Yeah, okay, I think it just needed to be rebased on some other changes, but they're working on a discovery handler. That's perfectly fine. There's quite a bit of items in the backlog. Let's maybe see which ones are assigned to everyone in the chat right now and then go from there. Let's see. The authentication one, Eugene and I are working on that one. We will have our architecture for next week or next month, and then we can talk about it then. But I think in the meantime, I'll look at the sidecar. Where else? And then I think IPv6 camera Kate was working on. It was a very similar thing. And I think this one was just a documentation change. This might not just be the whole thing. Yeah, it's purely informational. So this was just like a doc change, I should ping Joseph, and if it's okay, we should be good to go. Is there anything else in like the backlog that anyone would like to discuss? Or I know we're a little over time, so maybe we should start to wind down, but is there anything pressing that we should discuss in the backlog? Cool. If not, I guess we should end the meeting here then. If anyone has anything else, we could bring it up. If not, Happy New Year, everyone, and we'll see you all next month.
Thank you.
Here. Yeah,
Happy
thank you.
New Year.
Bye.